Hello and welcome to our second revision lesson. We're going to be looking at the second part of Chapter 8 on algebraic manipulation. Firstly, complete this do now task, so write down the question and expand the brackets. Pause the video while you work through them. Okay, let's check those answers. They're now on the screen, so make sure you get those marked. Pause the video if you need more time. Okay, so we're going to be looking at factorising to start with. We'll start with the more simple questions before we look at quadratic factorising. So, firstly, we're going to have this example. So it says factorise 6a squared plus 8a. So here we can see that both terms have a common factor. We're going to look at the numerical factors first, and we're always going to be looking for the highest common factors to factorise these fully. So the highest common factor of 6 and 8, that is 2. And then we'll look at the algebraic highest common factor, in this case a. So 2a will go on the outside of the bracket, and then we'll divide both terms by 2a. So we'll get 3a and plus 4. Have a go at these questions, write down the question as well as the factorised form. Pause the video while you work through them. Okay, let's check those answers. Pause the video to give yourself time to mark them. Okay, we're going to have a look at quadratic factorising now. So we'll have a look at a couple of different examples. Okay, so remember, quadratic is something that has an x squared in it. And if we're going to be factorising to two brackets, we're going to have an x squared and a constant term, so the number. There'll also sometimes, most likely, be an x term, but it doesn't always have to have that. So we have here x squared plus 8x plus 15. So this is one we're going to have two brackets, and the numbers that are going to go into the brackets, they need to have a sum of 8 and a product of 15. So remember, sum means they add up to 8, product means they multiply to make 15. So it's always easier to start with a 15. Think of the factors of 15 and see which of those add up to 8. In this case, we've got 3 times 5 is 15 and 3 plus 5 is 8, meaning 3 and 5 will be the numbers in the brackets. So we're going to have x plus 3 and x plus 5. The order of the brackets doesn't matter. We could have written x plus 5, then x plus 3. Another example. X squared, take away x, take away 20. Again, we're looking for numbers that have a sum. In this case, it's negative 1. So if it's just an x on its own, remember the coefficient there would be a 1. In this case, because it's negative, it would be negative 1. And then a product of negative 20. So first of all, think of the factors of 20. And really, we want negative 20. And then we're going to see which of those factors have a sum of negative 1. In this case, it's going to be negative 5 and 4. If we multiply them, we get negative 20. When we add, we get negative 1. So the numbers in the brackets are going to be negative 5 and 4. So x take away 5, x plus 4. Like before, the order of the brackets doesn't matter. We could have had x plus 4 and x take away 5. Just make sure you've got the correct sign with the number. So we'll have minus 5 in one bracket, plus 4 in the other. Okay, you're going to have a go at some of these now. Choose which level you're going to do, bronze, silver or gold. You can do more than one if you like, but you must do at least one full level. Write down the question as well as your answer. Okay, pause the video while you work through these. Okay, let's check those. Bronze answers, silver and gold. So pause the video to give yourself time to mark these. Okay, we're going to have a look at what's called the difference of two squares. And just a reminder, what that means, this is the general format. Remember, a difference between two numbers, you would subtract if you wanted to find the difference. So the difference of two squares, that is when you've got one square number, subtract another square number. So in this format, you've got a squared take away b squared. And that will factorise to this format, a plus b and a minus b. Now, if you wanted to expand those brackets out to double check, you can do. So looking at an example, we're going to factorise 4x squared take away 25. Now notice that every part here is a square number, which is what we want. So we're going to take the square root. So the square root of 4x squared is going to be 2x, and the square root of 25 is going to be 5. So we will have 2x plus 5 and 2x take away 5. You're going to have a go. Write down the question and write down the factorised form. There are a few on there that are not square numbers, so you will need to extra step first to see if you can work out what you will need to do. So pause the video while you work through these. And let's check those answers. You can see that for question D, G, H and J, you would have had to have factorised out a common factor before you get it in the format of squares. So well done if you got those four. Okay, we're now going to have a look at factorising quadratics with a coefficient of x squared. Really, that should say a coefficient of larger than 1. So, we're going to factorise 8x squared plus 2x take away 3. Now, there is a method where you can look at factors and do this by what's called inspection. Now, a lot of people will find that very challenging, but some people can just look at it and see what the answer is. If you are one of those people, fantastic, you use that method. But I'm going to stick with the other method that we learnt when we were teaching this topic, and that was the one where we split the middle term. So the first thing to do, this time we're looking for a number where the product is negative 24, and that has come from multiplying the coefficient of x squared and the constant term, so the 8 and the negative 3. And we still want a sum of 2 from that middle term, or the coefficient of x. So thinking of the factors of negative 24, that's going to be 6 and negative 4. And then if we add those, we will get 2, which is what we wanted. So we're going to split that middle term, that 2x is going to become 6x and take away 4x. Then we're going to split it down the middle. Remember to keep the dotted line to the side of that subtraction, or whatever symbol you have got there when you're doing your questions. And we're just going to look at the left-hand side of that dotted line and factorise that. And we can see that the highest common factor numerically is 2, and algebraically is x. So 2x will go outside the bracket. And we get 4x plus 3 inside the bracket. Now the right-hand side, you'll notice that there aren't any common factors. The only common factor, or the only thing in common, is the fact that they're both negative. So we're going to factorise out the negative 1, because we want both brackets to be the same. Otherwise, this isn't correct and it's not going to work. So we can now see that we have a common factor within that whole expression of 4x plus 3. So one bracket is going to be 4x plus 3, and the other bracket is going to be made up of the coefficients of 4x plus 3. So that's the 2x and take away 1. So we've got 2x take away 1 and 4x plus 3. So that is our factorised form. You're going to have a go at some questions now. So write down the question, show you're working, and then get to your answer. Okay, pause the video while you do these. Okay, answers are on the screen now. Just mark those before you move on. Okay, and the final topic is rearranging formulae. Now, formulae spelt like that is the plural of formula. So we're going to start with the slightly more simple ones before we look at the fairly tricky ones. Okay, so for each of the questions that we're doing today, we're going to make x the subject. It may not always be x, it may be some other letter, but for today it's going to be x. So I've got the formula y equals bx plus c. Making x the subject means I need to get x equals. So I'm trying to get x on its own. We're going to use inverse operations. So the first inverse operation we're going to do is to subtract c. And make sure we do that to both sides to keep it equivalent. So y take away c equals bx. And the next thing to get x on its own is to divide by b. Make sure we do that on both sides. So that gives us y take away c over b equals x. Make sure that fraction line is underneath the whole of y take away c. And then we could write this the other way around, x equals y take away c over b. You're going to have a go. You're going to make x the subject of these formulae, write down the original formula, and show you're working exactly like I've done on the example. Okay, pause the video while you work through them. Okay, let's check those answers and make sure you mark these. And now onto the slightly more tricky ones. So again, we're going to make x the subject. We've got ax plus by equals cx plus dy. First of all, this is more tricky because x is in two places. And we don't want that, we just want to have one of those x's. We can't have x equals something with an x in it, because x is then not fully the subject. So the first thing we're going to do is to get both of those x's on the same side of the equals. We're going to do that by subtracting cx from both sides. So that gives us ax take away cx plus by equals dy. Now we only want the terms with x on the left hand side, we want everything else on the right hand side. So we're going to subtract that by to give us ax take away cx equals dy take away by. Now you could have done both of those in one step if you are more confident with this topic. So we've now solved the problem of having x in two places, or on two sides, but it's still in two places. In order to get x only in one place, let's factorise the x out of the first two terms. So we're going to factorise that left-hand side. So that is going to give us x, and brackets, a take away c, equals dy take away by. You could factorise the right-hand side as well if you wanted at this point, but it won't do anything to help with finding x as the subject. And then the final step, we're going to divide by that bracket. So we will have x equals dy take away by over a take away c. And we have made x the subject. So that's fairly tricky. You want to make sure you show all your steps of workings to make sure you're consistent and accurate. So you're going to have a go at some. You're going to make x the subject of all of these formulae. Like before, write down the formula, write down your working as well as your answer. So pause the video while you work through these. Okay, and let's check those answers. Make sure you mark these. Well done if you got all of these right, because some of those were fairly tricky. Right, we are at the end of this revision lesson now. Next time we'll be looking at chapter 9. Okay, see you next time. Goodbye.